Welcome to A Conversation with Raymond Goode. I am Phil Pajali, a librarian at the Yonkers Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to this very exciting event. First, I'd like to say thank you to the following individuals and organizations for making this program possible. This is not just a Yonkers Public Library program, but it's being done with the assistance of Jay Michaels of Jay Michaels Communications, the Friends of Crestwood Library, and also Pinzero Productions. And Marianne Pinzero of Pinzero Productions is here and will be reading a selection from Raymond's work tonight. So I would also like to thank Z Baird, who is the branch manager at the Crestwood branch of Yonkers, for making this program possible as well. So before we begin, I'm going to read an intro for Raymond Goode, which I think is excellent and will give you a great overview of what he has accomplished. And I have to keep admitting people here as we go along, so please pardon as I raise the mouse and click every so often. So this is from one of Raymond's books, 350 Goals of a Leader. Okay, and it's the introduction of author, and it's credited to Shonda Davis and Bianca Brown. So I'm going to read that now. Born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, Raymond Goode graduated from Meadowbrook High School in 1996. At this time, Raymond Goode was overwhelmed by the need to serve others, which continues to shape his life today. In an attempt to placate this need, he enlisted in the Navy after his time with the Army. Despite 7 years of military civil service, a deep-seated desire to serve still flowed within him. Raymond dedicated 2 years of his young life to the public by serving the state of Virginia in the Bon Air Juvenile Correction Center in Bon Air, Virginia. This background in service and interactions with troubled youth prompted his transition to qualified mental health professional, serving multiple organizations in a variety of positions so that he could teach youth to believe so that they will achieve. As an adolescent growing up, Raymond Goode wasn't the most popular kid. He experienced the pitfalls of not belonging. Despite his formidable years, he was always told that one day he would be destined for greatness. Described by those closest to him as a chameleon due to his ability to adapt and change, Raymond is dedicated to giving all of himself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to the reader. In 2010, he eschewed all of his worldly possessions, becoming homeless in order to become a slave to his art, his passion, his muse, so that he may produce his best work. Above all, he is an idealist in love with love. In the author's words, love in its rarest form is accepting, loving and being yourself completely before loving anything else. The world will always criticize you. Find out who you are and remember to always be yourself. So welcome, author, playwright, motivational speaker, visionary Raymond Goode. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Phil. Great to be on. Great to be on.
So we'll begin with some questions. We're going to do an interview for the next few minutes, and then we're going to have some actors who performed in one of your plays through their eyes do some scenes from your work. Okay, so let's start off with some questions here.
Yes.
Your second book, Road to Oprah, is described in the book's foreword as a document of how a quote, impulsive excursion transitioned into one man's destiny. You had been in the Army and the Navy and worked as a correctional officer and a group home counselor. What led you on this excursion to writing and following your dreams? How did it change you?
I went through a bad depression and suicidal phase of life. I had found out that I was doing so much for other people, but I wasn't pouring back in me. And I went through this depression and suicidal. And as I started to come out of this depression, suicidal phase, these questions started hitting me. And it began the birth of Traces of You. And Traces of You, I interviewed 50 people with 15 questions and turned their answers to marriage proposal stories. Now, I had interviewed everybody from 16 to 82, Black, white, Asian, gay, straight, everybody that has a story. So all of these stories were so wide in stories, but they all ended in a love form. And I said, well, what do I do with this? Because you've given me this vision. You've given me this vision to carry forth and write this book. What do I do with it? And instantly, it said, that's an Oprah crowd. So December 31st, 2010, I quit all of my 3 jobs. I stepped out on faith and I traveled to Chicago in attempts to meet Oprah Winfrey. And my idea that I had was I had 1% chance of meeting Oprah in Chicago. I had a 0% chance of meeting her in Richmond. So me stepping out on faith and me leaving behind the old Raymond and stepping into the new Raymond was eye-awakening. It woke me up when I had one foot in the grave and I took that foot back out and I could see what the Creator, what God had given me and shown me. It was.
Yeah, and this is, and you describe a lot of this in the book Road to Oprah, and you talk about the experience of going on the road.
Yeah.
Stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
While you were writing this book and promoting the book.
Yeah, so December 31st, 2010, I took off, and within my first week, I was waking up in a hospital in Pittsburgh after stepping on a very deep nail. It was New Year's Eve, so I went out, I had a drink or so.
That was on the fence? You were climbing a fence, right?
Yeah, jumping the fence, yes. Jumping the fence, trying to do a documentary to show, everybody that I was on this road and I was on this path. And then a few days later, in Indiana, my car broke down. And that was only 4 days into the trips. And I was probably about 100 miles out of Chicago. And I said, I have to get to Chicago. And once I get to Chicago, I don't care if I walk around and get back in the bus and go back home, but I have to get to Chicago. And then once I got to Chicago, my friends started suggesting, well, why don't you just stay in a self-storage unit? Because all you have to do is sleep there. The rest of the day, you need to be out on the streets promoting yourself, promoting your books. You're trying to meet Oprah, then that's what you're there for. That's what you need to be doing for 20 hours out of the day. So within my first week, I was carless, on crutches, and living in a self-storage unit. And if that ain't rock bottom right there, 10 years, everything just started to build from there. But I had to find out who I was in that silence and living in that solitaire mode.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. Was it difficult making, now you wrote plays later on, and I was wondering if it was difficult making the transition from prose writing to playwriting, and if you have a preference.
I don't think it was too difficult once the stories were here, because through their eyes, with every newspaper, news story, a story that I heard personally, I put myself in the victim's shoes and wrote their stories. So once people started opening up to me, and it's not like I went and I tried to interview anyone, but I have more of a gift of listening. And when people start talking, a lot of us don't use our listening skills. And I say people will talk in circles, but eventually they get to exactly what they want to say, exactly what's in their heart. So when people begin telling me their stories, and I would walk away and I would write their stories down, of course, change names and places and stuff like that. But listening to their stories, I found out that they wanted their stories out there. And with them telling me their story, they sometimes wanted sympathy, they wanted empathy, or sometimes they didn't want you to say anything. They just wanted to tell their story and keep on moving. And when Through Their Eyes came out, when the book came out, because it's so full of deep emotions and pain, that people started gravitating toward the books. So once my actors started seeing the book and be like, oh, I have went through some emotional pain, and it started becoming a healing process for them too as well, it just took a life of its own.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very powerful work. It's basically, to people who are not familiar with this, it's a series of dramatic scenes tackling a variety of social problems, including domestic abuse, drug addiction, homophobia, And Raymond, you said you interviewed or you spoke to 50 people for this production. Yeah, it's really incredible. And there are also questions, like critical thinking questions, that are included at the end of each section. And I was
Yes,
wondering why you included those.
because this book still has to teach. And my background was working with the youth. I was an in-home counselor. I was a day treatment counselor. I was a Barnell juvenile corrections counselor as well. So I wanted to teach and educate, not just entertain. And even in the back of Through Their Eyes, there's a hotline for people to call if they're going through something. There's about 10 hotlines on there if people are going through something. So I wanted this to be used inside group homes, inside prisons, inside family units. Because a person with kids, they'll let their youth read the stories, then they'll let them answer the questions, and then the parent will go over it with the youth.
I see.
So for one, it brings family time together, and for two, it prepares the youth. So when they see this kind of scenery or situation going on, they aren't so shell-shocked. They're like, oh, I read that in the book. I know how to kind of maneuver, how to jump in, or if I need to move away from this situation.
Okay, yeah. I have a few more questions, but I can ask them later. I guess just to introduce what the actors are going to be reading. This is from the play of Through Their Eyes. Again, this is also a book, but this is something Raymond was telling us before that he's been bringing all over the country, right? What are some of the places where you've brought it already?
San Antonio, Riverwalk in San Antonio, obviously. Firehouse Theater and Henrico Theater in Richmond, Virginia. I just did it at the Ritz Theater in Florida. And then I do a lot of pop-up plays as well, where we just literally have a speaker, we'll have my performers, and we'll just go downtown in one of these major cities and we'll just perform. And I got the idea from actually William Shakespeare, because he used to do pop-up plays where he would just come in town, and within a week or two, he would just set up this extravagant production, and then boom, he's gone to another city.
Yeah, okay. So we'll hear from that in a moment. We're gonna have Marianne Pinzero is gonna read an excerpt from Raymond's book, 350 Goals of a Leader. If you weren't here when I held the book up, that's the cover. So Marianne, take it away. Thank you for being here also.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me, Phil. Raymond, it's truly a privilege to read Goals of a Leader. Every leader knows that passions have to be pursued. Leaders have unique talents and gifts they possess that must be shared with the world. Every leader knows that setbacks and failure are a part of self-growth. Life is about winning and losing, victories and losses. Persistence and consistency are what make a great leader. One must be able to perform at a high level for a long period of time. This is how you leave a legacy for the rest of the world to remember you by. No leaders should be prideful of their gift. The same people you see going up will be the same people you see going down. Always step outside your comfort zone, but always stay restricted within your boundaries. Knowing self-worth is different from being prideful. Oftentimes, our light shines brightest when we are the quietest. Every leader knows that in order to gain followers, they must give back to the world. No person should allow anyone to dictate the person they are designed to be. Your spirit and your personality are what make you who you are. Leaders must never make decisions from a point of anger. Leaders should make decisions with an open and fair mind. Anger and hatred will hinder a person from making concrete decisions based on concrete analysis. Every day is a gift that provides us with the opportunity to change the world. We should always rest our head at night with a sense of fulfillment. Each day taken for granted is another day not capitalizing on our fullest potential.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne.
Very nice. There's a really interesting story in 350 Goals of a Leader that basically explains what motivated Raymond to write the book. And it involves Steve Harvey, and I'm hoping he can tell that later after the performance when we do the Q&A. Okay, so we're going to move on to Through Their Eyes. So we have 4 actors reading. I'm going to read the bios for each one. So I will introduce them. The first actor who's going to be reading is Ariel Estrada. Ariel Estrada is an actor, producer, writer, and advocate in support of Asian American equity in the performing arts. As an actor, he has performed on television, film, commercials, digital media, and off Broadway. As a producer, Ariel is the founder and producing artistic director for Leviathan Lab, a nonprofit creative studio for Asian American performing artists. He was designated as an emerging arts leader by New York Foundation for the Arts and a rising leader of color by Theater Communications Group. He is also a founding steering committee member of New York City Theater Standards. So, welcome, Ariel.
Have you ever seen a train that you knew was going to wreck, and even though you try everything in your power to stop it, you just couldn't? That's the way it was with Virginia. I loved her so much, but there was nothing I could do to help her. When we first started dating, Virginia was only an occasional drinker. She would have 1 or 2 drinks when we had company or we went out to dinner, and things were so much fun back then and a lot simpler too. She started having a glass of wine every day when she got off work just to relax, and I didn't see it as much as a problem, but it wasn't long before that 1 glass became 2, and then 2 glasses became 3 glasses, and pretty soon she was finishing off a bottle a day. I began to see a problem when our daughter began to question about why mommy didn't cook or clean anymore. I would tell her that mommy was sick and that she was always tired from a long day of work. I guess in a way I became an enabler. Virginia used to have the most terrible mood swings. One moment we would be having a conversation, and the next she'd be yelling and screaming about God knows what. I remember once when she was arguing with our daughter about leaving a doll on the floor, Virginia slapped her. She slapped her for no reason and took off running to the bedroom. After comforting my daughter, I went to check in on Virginia. She was lying across the bed crying. Virginia told me that she felt worthless and she didn't know how to control herself anymore. And she said that she wanted help. She said that she wanted to stop the madness because when she looked at the mirror, she didn't know who was staring back at her. That was the first time that we started talking about her going to rehab. I assured her that I would stay by her side. That night, we prayed before we went to sleep. I woke up around 3 a.m. and Virginia was not in the bed. I searched the house and I found her outside. She was drinking gin from the bottle and talking recklessly, saying that she didn't need to go to rehab and she felt like she could kick the habit on her own. Here was Virginia drinking gin straight from the bottle, screaming that she could fix her drinking problem on her own. When I tried to take the bottle away from her, she became irate and said, "No one understands me and what I'm going through." I didn't know what to say, so I told her that she was destroying our family. That's when she screamed, "Fuck you," and threw the bottle at me. I barely dodged it. She stormed in the house, and I just sat there, stunned. I couldn't figure out where things had gone so wrong. I sat out there for a long time trying to figure out how I'd missed the signs. When I finally went in the house, I found her passed out on the couch with a half-empty beer can in her hand. I began to think of all the signs that led her to this point. I remember one night after leaving a Christmas party, we had stopped at Walmart to pick up a few things. She walked off and I couldn't find her for nearly an hour. I finally called the police. When they came, they found her outside sleeping on a park bench. That should have thrown up red flags, but I shrugged it off because we were drinking that night. I should have realized then that this was a problem that I couldn't fix. She was right about one thing. She'd pushed us so far away that I didn't know what she was going through. Virginia's drinking began to worsen. She was calling out of work constantly, and the days she was too drunk to call in, I would call and make up some kind of excuse for her. After 6 months of her working on and off, they finally laid her off. I tried so hard to reach out to her, but I just couldn't get through to her. It was like she became a ghost in our own house. My daughter and I would go out without her. I always tried to avoid those questions that my daughter would ask, but she has eyes. Even though my daughter was too young to know what was going on, she knew something was wrong. One day my wife came to me crying. She said that she was tired of living like this and that she said she wanted help. The very next day I checked her into rehab. I told her I loved her and would be right there for her when she came out. 2 months had passed and she'd made significant improvements. Whenever my daughter and I went to visit Virginia, Virginia was in a much happier mood. She even got the color back in her skin and regained her sense of humor. She came home a month later, and for a while, everything was timid. I guess I was looking for the old signs of Virginia, but she proved to be really trying. She got her job back, and we started doing things as a family again. We cut out going to parties, functions, or anywhere that served alcoholic beverages. For a while, everything was normal. Our anniversary came up and we went to an Italian restaurant to celebrate. Since she was doing such a good job with her sobriety, I thought it would be a good idea for us to have a glass of wine with our dinner. One glass became 2, and soon she was on her 3rd, and it was like clockwork how it all started all over again. That night she could barely walk to the car, but when we came home, we made passionate love all night. For the next few days, everything was fine, but things began all over again. I remember changing a light bulb in the bathroom and looked over the top of the cabinet. I saw one of those mini bottles of vodka. I was hoping I had overlooked it when I searched the house during her rehab stay, but I started checking her old places and found bottles all over the house. I found those little bottles in the cushions of the couch, the hall closet, and I even found them hidden in our daughter's bedroom. Not only was her drinking worse, but she found better ways to disguise her drinking. The last time I saw Virginia alive was December December 22nd. She said she was running out to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. It slipped my mind that she always kept a bottle in the trunk of the car. She called it her emergency kit. The police helped me to piece the rest of the night together. I knew she had made it to the mall because of the bags from the KB's toy store in the back seat. The police told me they found a half a bottle of gin under the passenger seat and said that she was reaching for it when the car slid in the back of an 18-wheeler. She was killed instantly. Now that I think of it, it might have been easier trying to stop a train. It had been hard on my daughter and me trying to cope with the pain of me losing a wife and her a mother. Every morning, my daughter runs in the bedroom looking for her mother. I have two faces nowadays. I have to be the strong one for my daughter because she needs it the most, but I am I'm a complete mess. As soon as our daughter falls asleep, after trying to wear 2 masks, I succumbed to my own worst enemy. I began drinking. That is why I'm checking myself into rehab today. I refuse to put my daughter through that again. I refuse to let her grow up without both of her parents. I only pray that you can help me.
Thank you, Ariel. The next actor who is going to read is Katrina D Robinson. Katrina Robinson has been acting for several years, beginning with the opportunity to grace the stage with the incomparable Shirley Caesar in the stage play When Love Is Not Enough. Since then, she has been in 3 stage plays, informational commercials for Recycling Perks, Nest Realty, VA 811, DuPont, and WebMD, as well as participating in 48-hour film festival short film Stays Together. She has reenacted monologues for Raymond Goode and appeared in television crime drama shows such as For My Man and Copycat Killers. Welcome, Katrina.
When I first met William, he was the sweetest man I knew. On our first date, he took me ice skating. Neither of us knew how to ice skate, but he tried to show off by doing a spin on the ice and fell. I've never laughed so hard in my life until I saw another couple crash to the ice trying to avoid him. He was so embarrassed. He just laid there laughing on the ice. He was so embarrassed. So I skated over to him and tried to help him up, but he pulled me down on top of him and he kissed me. And that was our first kiss. Even though it was below freezing temperatures there, his kiss warmed my whole body. Well, I fell asleep on the ride home, or at least he thought I was asleep. I remember that he was playing the same song over and over. He was the perfect gentleman. He walked into the door, kissed me on the cheek, and then he just left. Well, a few months later, I found out that I was pregnant. He insisted that we get married. I mean, he told me that he wanted his child to be raised in a traditional family. but I wasn't ready to get married. But we both decided that spiritually we couldn't move forward unless we were married. I knew that getting married was the right thing to do. And I did love him. We went to the Justice of the Peace and we tied the knot. Then a few months later, we had our precious little angel. Well, after we were married, things immediately began to change. That sweet man that I had come to love turned into a monster almost overnight. I remember the first day he hit me. He came home late one night after drinking with his buddies, and he began demanding sex like I was his concubine. He felt like now that we were married, he had rights to my body. So on this night, he just started touching me, and I told him that I wasn't in the mood, and then his body language changed. And when I resisted again, he slapped me in my face. So I instantly became terrified of him. I thought that he was going to rape me. I didn't know what to expect. The only thing that stopped him was my daughter. She started crying in the other room. And her crying snapped him out of his trance-like state. And then he stumbled out of the room, out of the bedroom. That night and the next couple of nights, I slept in my daughter's room. I felt that I was safer. And on the nights that he would go out drinking, I stayed in my daughter's room. Then the drinking became an everyday thing, as well as the demand for sex, followed by beatings if I denied his advances. Usually I would find a gift of some sort after the beatings, because this was his way of making things better between us. But I used to have to wear sunshades to cover my black eyes and long wigs to hide the swelling in my face. People kept asking questions, but eventually I ran out of lies to tell them, especially when they knew I was lying. I couldn't hide it. Then William's violent behavior became even higher, just escalated, and then the beatings increased. I remember my first trip to the hospital. William came home after drinking with his buddies as usual. And when he came in, he was furious because dinner wasn't ready on time. Then he grabbed me and he shoved me over the dinner table and knocking everything to the floor. Then he started yelling at me. Does this seem hot to you? I want my food hot and ready when I come home. The entire time William was yelling at me, he was throwing scalding hot mashed potatoes on me. Yeah, that's how I got third-degree burns on parts of my body. And then he grabbed my arm and twisted it so far back that it broke in two places. And I started crying. But you know what? My tears meant nothing to William. He made me clean up the mess before even allowing me to go to the hospital. Yeah. And sitting in the hospital was the first time I actually feared for me and my daughter's life. because William had always told me that if I ever tried to leave him, he would kill our daughter first. And then he'll come back to kill me. I felt trapped. I had no one to turn to. I became empty on the inside. And I just continued to take the beatings because I didn't know. I was scared out of my mind. But eventually the moment came, and I finally decided to leave him. It was on a night where he, once again, came home drunk, demanding sex. And by this time, I was so used to giving in that finally I had had enough and decided to fight back. I told William, no, I'm not having sex with you. And I pulled the covers tightly to me. I was proud of myself. But then William wasn't having it. He reached between the mattresses. He retrieved his gun. He cocked it, put it to my head, and he pulled the trigger. But somehow God intervened, and he jammed that gun. William looked at that gun in such a despicable manner that he threw it on the bed and he stumbled out of the room. So I picked up the gun. I cocked it. I mean, I had already known how to use it because I spent countless hours in the mirror with the gun, daydreaming about using it on him. And William walked back into the room with a bottle of vodka in one hand and a butcher knife in the other. He saw me clutching the gun and he lunged at me. And then I closed my eyes and I fired one shot. When I opened my eyes, I saw William sprawled out on the floor, a puddle of blood. William. So I called the police and I told them what I had done. I did not intend to kill my husband. That was my initial plan, was to leave him. But I felt trapped. When he lunged at me, I pulled the trigger of instinct. I swear I didn't mean to, but he was going to kill me. And I was afraid for my life and the life of my daughter. I did what any mother would do to save her child. Please, please, I pray, please, I pray that you find me not guilty.
Thank you, Katrina. Our next actor is Ray Bullock. Ray Bullock, since 1996, has been a touring actor, comic, and professional wrestler, and has appeared in over 75 films and television productions. He has also appeared in countless stage productions. He is extremely honored to be a part of Through Their Eyes. Welcome, Ray.
My grandson, he tell me, you want to talk with me today and use this in your films. to put into museum. I am aware that I am old, but museum? Not yet. No, you want me to start. You want to know about the time we spend in the ghettos, what you would know as camps, yeah? I remember when we arrived, we were given instruction not to go close to the fences or to the trucks. One day, my friend Ariel, he played too closely to one of the trucks. They shoot him 3 times. They left his body in the street for their dogs to tear apart. He was 9 years old. Sometime later, we'll never forget, my brother, he make eye contact with the soldier. They kicked him with their boots and they beat him with their rifles. My mother and I were being held back by the other members of the camp who they knew if, yeah. The officer come and he slapped my mother's face and tells to her, he should not have resisted. My brother died 2 days later. The war ends and one day I were to come to this country and I remember my mother, she wakes me up, I put on my clothes for temple, we walk, and all the way to the city. We go into this building with this man, nice suit, the hair. I remember, I was impressed with this man, yeah. He talks to my mother, he talks to me, she signs things, I sign some things, and he tells us to raise our hands, takes the oath. This is what we knew. This is all we know. He's in shock. He says, no, not like that. Not like that. Never like that again. Forgive, I do not talk of these things in long time. But we come to this country and life is good. My mother, she finds work and I go to school and I work. We're not doing education. And one day I come home and my mother is watching the television. And she sees the young men and the young women being sprayed with hoses, beaten with the clubs, and torn apart by their dogs. And my mother, she is saying, it is happening again. I say, no, mother, no. They do this, so it does not happen again. My mother says, we should have done this. But, like I say, time she goes, yes. I get my own family, I get the children, I get the grandchildren, the great grandchildren. But I come to speak to you today because I am scared. I see again on the television, this is a woman at the baseball game. They spit on her for wearing her religious garb. the man murdered on the street, begging for the breath of life. And then the man comes on and he talks of putting names on lists, throwing children into cages, saying, do not believe what you hear, trust only me. This is how it happens again. Must not let it. You must take pride in your culture. You must take pride in who you are. You must resist. For if you do not, the next time you will not be able to.
Thank you, Ray. The fourth and final reader this evening will be Melanie Chartoff. Melanie Chartoff is a lifelong stage screen voice and now Zoom actor and new author. Her first book, Odd Woman Out, Exposure in Essays and Stories, is a 5-star hit on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. She's performed on and off Broadway and created roles on Seinfeld, Newhart, Parker Lewis Can't Lose, and has voiced Dee Dee Pickles on Rugrats for 30 years. Welcome, Melanie.
My husband and I had both seen the signs when Torrance was just a little boy. He used to play with his sister's dolls instead of the G.I. Joes that my husband bought him. My husband thought he would get him involved in sports and that would break him of the habit. Terrence did very badly in sports. But my husband thought that if he was around other boys, it would toughen him up. But I could see in his eyes that he hated playing football. He tried so hard to impress us, but when I looked at him, I knew something was different about my little boy. When he was 15, we sent him to a church that said they could cure him of his sexual tendencies. They treated homosexuality like it was a disease. Torrance would write to me daily about how much he hated it and how he felt like he was being punished for something he had no control over. As a mother, I was torn on the inside because I felt like we were punishing him for something that he didn't do. I remember walking into his room one night, catching him masturbating to a gay porn magazine. I couldn't bring myself to tell my husband. My husband. He tried so hard to make Terrence into a man. It would have crushed him if he had known about that. My husband kept telling me, it's just a phase, he'll grow out of it. But after that day, I knew that my son was special. And that it was my job as a mother to love him unconditionally. My son shied away from all the high school dances. We had to force him to go to his senior prom. And he ended up taking a girl from his school. And my husband told me, you see, I told you it was just a phase. The next day I saw Terrence crying in his room. We talked, and that's when he told me that he was gay. He cried so much. We cried together. Torrance told me that on his prom date, and he had had sex with the girl, but he felt so dirty afterward. After prom night, my husband never spoke on the gay subject again. He thought prom night was the turning point in Torrance's life. My son received a full scholarship to Morehouse College for engineering, and my husband adopted this thought, well, out of sight, out of mind. And when Torrance came home to visit, life was good. We laughed and we joked. Torrance came home in the middle of his sophomore year and told us he was not going to go back to school. He shut himself in his room and he refused to talk to anyone. We tried to talk to him, but he would just lie on his bed in silence. It was like he completely shut down from the outside world. He stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped living. I remember the night he finally came down for dinner. By that time, he was spending all of his time in his room, so it was a surprise that he even came out to eat. And that's when my husband and I knew that he had something to say. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time, and he finally said, "I have AIDS." And I instantly started crying. That was all he said before he got up and started walking from the table, and my husband called him back, and I'll never forget the words he said. "I love you, son. We love you. That will always remain. You are our son, and we can work through anything. We are a family, and we will get through this as a family." My husband told us all to grab hands, and we prayed all night. And after that night, things began to get better. We had our rough times, like any other family, but we pulled through it. My son found the strength to go back to college, and we started talking daily. He had his bad days, but he was determined to finish school. Graduating meant something to him. Graduating was one of the things that he wanted to accomplish. Graduating meant the world to him, and it meant the world to us. Torrance lived his life to the fullest. And he graduated with top honors from Penn State. He moved on to become the top engineer at his job. He lived every day like it was his last. The day he died took a big part out of all of us. My son was gay. My son had AIDS, and I am so proud of him. He was my son.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you to all of the actors. This was extraordinary. This is a wonderful group of actors with some really powerful writing. So thank you all.
Good job to the performers. They did a beautiful job. Good job. Yes.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for some questions from our attendees, I wanted to ask you, Raymond, about that conversation you had with Steve Harvey that prompted you to write 350 Goals of a Leader. It's a great story, so I was wondering if you could tell that.
How will you go from this to that?
I know. Yeah.
Yes, 350 Goals of a Leader. So I was in Long Island, New York, and I heard over the airways that Steve Harvey will be doing a book signing in the Bronx. So I went out there. And when I got there, there was a line wrapped around the building to get inside. And I talked to someone, they said you had to have bought one of his books to even have gotten in. So I was looking real business-like. I had on my Road to Oprah shirt. I had on my Traces of UP coat. So I kind of walked right to the front and walked right in. Like the security, they looked at me, but I looked so astute, I just walked right past them. So I get in the area where Steve Harvey is supposed to be. And the security, they come to a suite. They say everybody is supposed to leave. So once we are leaving out, the back door opens and in walks Mr. Harvey. And he looks directly at my shirt and he looks directly at me. And then he goes off to do his book signing. So I'm following. And as soon as he gets past a certain point, the barriers close up, you know, to get to where he was at. And I'm looking over the barrier and I'm thinking, oh God, this has to happen now. There's no way I can be this close and not get to him. So I remember I put my hand on the barrier because I'm about to jump in and go over. I don't care what happened. Like, security come get me, but this is today I'm gonna meet Steve Harvey. And as soon as I said, God, give me strength, like the barriers open up and in walked this group of people, and I just followed in with the crowd. So I get right behind Steve Harvey, and I really don't know what to do there. Now I'm like, what I do? But then my military instincts kick in because I did 4 years Army, 4 years Navy. So I go into parade rest, which is 2 hands behind your back. You're looking straight forward. You're not making any kind of movement. And so Mr. Harvey's his real security. They finally do a sweep and they're like, everybody who's not supposed to be in this area has to leave. But they look at me and I'm looking so militant that they don't even say anything to me. So after about standing here for about 30 minutes, one of his guys come to me. He's like, well, what are you doing here? He know I'm not security, but he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, look, I just need a chance to talk to Steve Harvey to talk about my books and stuff. He was like, all right, sit down. You're doing a good job. I'm going to let you talk to him. So I'm sitting there the entire time. It had to be like an hour and a half, and I'm too scared to move. I don't want to make any sudden movements. And then when he finished doing his book signing, they put me right in front of him, and it goes my time to talk, and I go. Traces of You. I interviewed 50 people with 15 questions, turning their answers to marriage proposal stories. Road to Oprah, my faith-based journey, was talks about me quitting my 3 jobs at home, stepping out on faith to do what I'm doing now. Through their eyes, with every newspaper, news story, a story that I heard personally, I put myself in the victim's shoes and wrote their stories. And then how to write and print your own book for under $300. And then at some point, he asked me, I happen to mention that I'm a leader. And he says, you're a leader of what? And I couldn't think of one thing to say. Everything fleeted my mind right then and there. And then his security, he put his hand on the table and he said, that's enough, Mr. Goode. That's all the time we have. And Mr. Harvey said, no. You let this young man speak. He has something to say. So he asked me how many goals did I have. I said, I have at least 10 goals. He said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, write down 350 goals, and then come back and see me. So I remember I'm walking away and I'm reflecting, but I'm kicking myself. I'm like, he didn't think I was the greatest guy in the world. He didn't say you're going to be on my show next week. You made it, this, that, and the third. And I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, you stumped me on 2 questions. You stumped me on leaders. He told me to write 350 goals. You stumped me on leaders, go. Leaders, 350 goals of a leader. It was written, the title was written right there.
Will Steve Harvey be getting any of the royalties?
He'll get namesake. He'll get a little more exposure.
Well, to get a little more serious here about this is specifically about Through Their Eyes.
Yes.
I was wondering if after performances of this play, you've been approached by people who have been in these situations that are described by the actors.
I want to say yes, but more of my performers have been approached. Like Miss Katrina, the story that Miss Chartoff read, the story that Mr. Bullock read, like they come to them because instantly they think it's their story that they're reading. So they want to unburden themselves because someone else just went through what they have been going through, you know? And so I tell my performers, I said, then don't tell them it's an act. Don't tell them you're part of Through Their Eyes. let them tell their story to you as if you just finished telling your own story, because you're giving them a chance to heal. You're giving them a chance to unburden themselves. And usually they get a hug, a cry. And so, yes, I get my performers get more of it than what I do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the actors were so good, and there was so much immediacy and intensity to the performances. I felt like I was actually being spoken to by them.
Yes.
It was an actual encounter.
And for my performers, like my performers are the people that I choose, because I'm not always looking for actors. I'm not always looking for thespians. I'm looking for people that's been through something, so we can have something to pour from to put into this production. So yeah, it gives everyone a chance, and yeah.
Do we have any questions from anybody in the chat or audio?
I guess that means we did a great job.
Yeah, it was really terrific. I know if you look at that, Raymond, you'll see there are a lot of compliments to your writing, to the actors. Great job to all the actors. Powerful performances. Bravo. Sorry, I'm really late. Well, that's not a compliment, but
glad you came.
Yeah, Marianne wrote, Raymond, the writing really gives insight as to how people have such challenges. So.
And I had to go through my own depression and suicide, and that's why I think that's where my writing comes from, because now I understand emotions. I understand pain, happiness, sadness, victory. I understand all of it. And so when people go through these traumatic situations, they may feel a different level of pain when they're talking about it, but it still all has the same emotions. So the same emotions that I went through with my suicide, with my suicidal time, it's the same emotions that someone is going to go through when they're going through an abusive time. They're going to feel pain. They're going to feel hurt. They're going to feel anger. So as long as I take that pain that I internalized and went through, then I put it into someone else's shoes. And I'm like, okay, well, you got upset when, in the case of Katrina's Not Guilty, you got upset when he threw you on the ground and started throwing dirt. That's fear. You got scared right there. So that's knowing when to put the emotions in that monologue or in that story. So once I went through my own pain, then I knew how to do it with other stories when I heard it.
As a performer, I hate to ask a question, but this is something I've always wanted to know out of all the years I've known you, Raymond. I know you have some pain in you, and I've read the books, and I've been a part of your productions. You seem to be able to grab performers who have shared that type of pain, and you can see it in them. Myself, as well as others, I've talked to a lot of the performers you've had. Is there something that you feel flocks people who have shared some pain together?
You said flocks?
Yeah, like brings them together. Yeah, like people who have had a shared pain, do you feel like there's some energy that just brings those folks together, because you've been able to pick so many people who have either shared the same type of pain that are in the stories that they're telling, or they have some type of strong pain that helps them communicate and be as honest as they can in performances?
I think everyone has a story, and I think everybody wants to get their story out, and these monologues give them an opportunity to get their story out, and it becomes a healing process for that person. And then when we all get together and we have our rehearsals, it becomes a healing process for other people because they're around other people. And it allows them to open up, because some of the performers that I use, they are very, very introverted people. They want to keep that pain tight and close. But when I get them around in in a rehearsal in the same room, then they're able to share each other's pain. They're able to heal. And then when Raymond Goode is out of that circle, they're able to call upon each other performers, because they all know that they can pour from the same pain and they can all enlighten each other. Thank you for asking.
You'll have to tell me sometime about the pain I gave off to make you cast me in that first piece that you made.
Yes, yes. We won't tell him about that one. Yes, Ray has been on my first stage all the way up until he travels out to my productions. Sidebar, the story that he read is actually the story that he wrote for my book and is a very, very personal story to him. So I am honored that every time he pulls this piece out, he puts I mean, it's not like he puts his own emotions and pain into it, and it is just an amazing, amazing piece, like all of the other pieces. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Sumi was asking if the production's going to be in New York City anytime soon.
That's a question you need to answer, Phil. That's a question. Phil, will Through Their Eyes be in New York sometime soon with everything opening up? My performers are ready.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll talk about this and see what we can do.
Yeah. Yes, it is a traveling production. As soon as I can get to New York, I promise you, I'm bringing it to you. Yes, because I want this on Broadway, off Broadway, in the middle of Times Square, everything.
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, technically I think the theaters can open now, but it looks like in the fall, I think shows are going to be, starting up.
And then as being a creative, I find ways to go around. For instance, we did a production here in Virginia, and when COVID was really, really high, we could only have 25 people per show. So instead of one show, we just did 4 one-hour shows with only up to 25 people in the audience. So as a creative, you should never stop creative. You should always be creating 24/7. Nothing stops the creative juices from flowing. It should only make you stronger.
Yeah, I'm curious if it must be emotionally draining for the actors to do that so many. You're saying they would do that 4 times a day, or?
Yes, it's I believe it's emotionally draining just to pull it off just one time, because they really have to dig into some really hard emotions. So just to even pull it off one time, I'm amazed that they can pull it off one time. And then I really asked them, like, how do you go through the depressing process afterwards? Because some of these monologues get very, very heavy.
Yeah. Where can our attendees purchase your books, Raymond?
Website is RaymondGoode.com, GOODE, RaymondGoode.com. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all social media is Raymond Goode, RaymondGoode, RaymondGoode.com. Yes, please feel free to purchase a book. I do motivational speaking. Like I said before, this is a traveling production. So if someone wants to do a full production of Through Their Eyes, A, we don't mind traveling. B, if there's an event going on, like I know we have AIDS Awareness Week, and they have an event going on, then we can pull some of the monologues from the book just to add it into your program. And if there's any young directors out there looking to branch off and put on new works, then they can look through the book Through Their Eyes, and they can become directors of Through Their Eyes. And then I become the playwright. Then they can work with their own people, and we share the accolades.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
And Marianne, you wanted to ask a question, right? You had your hand up.
I did. More just kind of a statement. It's interesting, Raymond, you and I have the exact same background. You were a youth worker through Youth Protective Services, and I was a school teacher in a residential facility for students who had gotten into different situations. It's very interesting, those challenges of being in the profession. And I think unless you are in the profession, it's very hard to describe or have anyone understand fully what it is to be a youth worker, an educator, an admin, a support staff. Like, people would say that couldn't possibly have happened. And I'm like, no, yeah, that happened.
Yes.
That
Yes.
definitely did happen. And it was very interesting. I stayed with it for 25 years. And had opted for their privacy to actually not write about it. But it's very interesting because we all of the students and I that I worked with connected on Facebook. So there's a lot of them sharing photos of me with them that I didn't have at the Dance Theater of Harlem come up. And one of the boys walked right up to one of the ballerinas and said, "How do I become a dancer?" And they granted him a scholarship for the summer. Kelvin Rotardier actually gave this young man a scholarship, and our superintendent, who is a big culture vulture, paid for him to have the proper clothing, and it was great, and it was moments like that, that really made it. But it's interesting because I think you would agree with me, as much as you give and as crazy as it gets emotionally, the time flies, and it's a very absorbing way to spend your days.
Yes.
I think the tricky part is when the students get into situations they'll never get out of. And that's where I think it becomes a challenge for any worker, So I give you a world of credit.
Thank you.
For being able to really push past that and rise up.
And just like you mentioned, like when the kid came and they brung you the picture, and that's a most exhilarating feeling. Like after I see a kid 10 years later and they come to me and they say, "You are the one that helped me." Oh, just all emotional and definitely. And I still try to help them with words of encouragement right then and there. I encourage them to come and be a part of through their eyes. You went through it. You know what's going on inside these group homes and in home. Come be a part of through their eyes. Because sometimes after they get out of that group home, their life still kind of goes downhill. Well, I wasn't just there for that group home. I'm here to push you up every time I see you. Every time I see you. Yes.
Exactly. It's a very different life when you're not working there anymore. I think you would agree with me. It's just a very different life outside of that.
Yes.
I thought the writing was absolutely brilliant. And the way your actors interpreted the material was really...
They're good.
Genuine. They really embodied those characters.
We have been rehearsing for the last 2 weeks, and most of them hit it on the first shot. So once I saw Ariel and I saw Melanie and we did it the first time, I said, "Melanie, this is your 50 years experience. I ain't got to say anything to you at all." So yeah, they're really, and I am so humble and blessed that they came on to be a part of this project. I mean, I'm humble and blessed that Ray and Katrina, they're a part of it, but they absolutely love me. They're always a part of it. But I'm very happy that I got a Broadway actress and I got Ariel Estrada, and they absolutely love the monologues enough to come and be a part of it. And definitely check out Odd Woman Out from Melanie Chartoff, who's 5 stars on Amazon. She's just an absolutely amazing human being. So yes, she's cool. Thank you to all of my performers.
If, as a performer, could I thank Mr. Goode one more time, because I do it every time I work with him. I've known this man since he was 16 years old, and even back then he was given words of encouragement. He even told all of us one time in a theater exercise, "Just remember, every single one of you is a diamond." So this is not just something he picked up after a certain struggle. This man's been doing this his entire life. And if I could, you perform a mitzvah every single day, sir. And there aren't enough thank yous in this world to equal up to what you've given to it. And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you, sir. And before we do jump off, I want to say thank you to Jay Michaels of Jay Michaels Communications. Because I had to come back on because if I don't mention him, he is the one that pieced us all together. And when I first met him, he is just a lovely, lovely man, and he is really cool. So Jay Michaels, I said your name. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks. And I gotta go. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye. And we'll say goodnight. So thank you again. Take care.